Welcome to the sleep paralysis tapes. Settle into the dark, pull the covers close, and let the heavy silence fill your room. Tonight, we descend into chilling tales of the unexplained. Before the screen fades to pitch black, I invite you to become part of this archive. If you have your own terrifying encounters, please contact me and I will narrate your story in a future tape. If these shadows bring you comfort, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Now, close your eyes. Do not look at the foot of your bed. Just listen and let us begin. It started with a gift. That's how these things often begin. Something you didn't ask for. Something that seems, at first, like a stroke of luck. Anya was a commercial photographer in Norwich. She shot products, restaurants, real estate listings. Her world was about light, composition, and getting the job done. She was not a person who believed in ghosts. She believed in shutter speeds and client invoices. She was, in every practical sense, the last person you'd expect to be involved in something like this. The flat came from a distant aunt she barely remembered. A ground-floor conversion in a manor house built in 1730. It was in Norfolk, out in the quiet, where the fields are flat and the sky feels large. It was too good to refuse. Free housing, in a place with history. Anya saw it as a kind of professional retreat. She moved in early spring. The flat itself was beautiful in that old, stubborn way. High ceilings that swallowed sound, drafts that moved through the rooms like silent tenants. The main bedroom had a single, large window. It was original, single-paned glass, slightly warped. It looked out onto a worn stone staircase. It wasn't part of the house proper. It was an external servant's staircase. It led from what was once a kitchen courtyard up to a walled garden. Now, the garden was just a tangle of weeds and old rose bushes, but the stairs remained. 3 steps up, a small landing, then 3 more steps turning to the right. They were worn smooth in the centers from 200 years of feet. Anya liked the view. It was specific. It had character. She thought it was a perfect little slice of history, framed by her window. She took a photo of it on her first day for her own records, a photographer's habit. The first few nights were quiet, but not peaceful. The silence in that house wasn't empty. It was thick. It had texture. She'd wake up sometimes, unsure why. The old house settled around her with clicks and sighs. They didn't quite sound like wood or stone. They sounded, sometimes, like footsteps stopping just outside her door. She dismissed it. You do that. You're in a new place. An old place. Your senses are adjusting. The air is different. The darkness feels deeper because the ceilings are higher. It's all perfectly normal. It's all explainable. And for a while, it was. Life settled. She arranged her studio in the living room. She learned the best times for natural light in the kitchen. She enjoyed the solitude. It was a quiet, if slightly isolated, new normal. But the sleep never quite settled. She'd drift off and then find herself awake in the deep middle of the night. Her heart would thump quietly, as if she'd heard a door close. But no door had closed. She'd stare at the ceiling, listening. The only thing she could hear was her own breathing and the faint imagined creak of those stone stairs outside. It's easy to dismiss these first signs. It's the rational thing to do. But rationality, it's a shield. And sometimes the thing coming toward you doesn't care about your shield. It just cares about the timing. And the timing in this story is everything. You'll see that soon. But for now, Anya was just a woman in a new home. She looked out at an old staircase, unaware that the view from her window was not just a view. It was a stage. And something was about to begin its performance. It was the clock that made it real. Before that, it was just bad dreams. A feeling. But the clock gave it a schedule. Anya would wake to that thick, smothering silence. Her eyes would snap to the digital numbers on her bedside table. 4004, Every time. Not 4003. Not 4005. The paralysis would hold her, a leaden weight on her chest. Her eyes would be dragged to the window, and she would see the woman on the stairs. At first, she was just a smudge, a patch of deeper shadow. But as the nights repeated, the shape resolved. A woman in a long drab dress, a brownish gray like old linen left in the rain. Her posture was stiff, her head slightly bowed. She stood on the stone servant's staircase, perfectly still, facing the house. Now, a reasonable person would have left. They would have called a friend or a priest. But Anya was a photographer, and a photographer's first instinct is to document, to prove it, if only to herself. So she created a protocol. That's what she called it in her head. The 4004 protocol. Each night before bed, she positioned her camera on the nightstand. Lens cap off. Settings fixed for low light. The shutter was set to silent. All she'd have to do if she woke was turn her head a few inches and press the button with her nose. It was a lifeline, a way to fight back. The next time it happened, she used it. The paralysis locked her down at 4004. The figure was there, halfway up the stairs. Anya strained and turned her head. She pressed her face against the camera. She felt the soft click. But this time, she did something else. She fought to blink. Once, twice, to clear the sleep from her eyes. And the figure was there. But it was different. It had moved. It was one step lower on the staircase than the night before. The realization was a cold flood. It wasn't a random apparition. It was progressing. Coming down the stairs, one step, every night. The next day, she downloaded the photo. She expected a blur, a lens flare. What she saw was not a blur. The picture showed the night as a grainy gray soup. But there, on the stairs, was a distinct shape. Translucent, yes. Faint. But undeniably a person in a long dress. And the most chilling detail, the figure's head wasn't bowed. It was turned, just slightly. It was facing the window. Facing her. Anya stared. The rational part of her mind scrambled. A trick of the light. A smudge on the glass. Her mind seeing patterns. But she knew the truth. The camera only recorded the light. And the light that night had been shaped like a woman, looking directly into her bedroom. She checked the file's information. The timestamp was exact. 4004 a.m. That's when the protocol changed. It was no longer about proof. It was about tracking. A countdown. She just didn't know what the clock was counting down to. No. The figure reached the bottom of the stairs. Anya had counted. 6 steps, 6 nights. The protocol had become her grim nightly ritual. She knew with a cold certainty what the 7th night would bring. The figure would have nowhere left to stand but the flagstone path directly outside her window. This is where a rational person would have left. But rationality had become a thin veneer. Underneath, a deeper, more stubborn instinct took over. It was the need to know. She couldn't run from a ghost if she didn't know its name. So she went looking for it. She found Martin at the local archives. He was a man in his 60s with the calm, patient air of someone who spends his life with dead things, documents, ledgers, maps. She showed him the photo on her phone, the clearest one from the 3rd night. She didn't mention the time. She just asked about the stairs, about the house. He adjusted his glasses, peered at the screen, and nodded slowly. Ah. Yes. Those are the old servants' stairs from the Raynham kitchen gardens. He looked up at her. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. Your flat is on the original estate grounds. The manor you're in was the dower house, built later. Raynham Hall. The name landed in her stomach like a stone. There are stories, of course, Martin continued. His voice dropped into a practiced historical tone. Most famous ghost in Norfolk, some say. The brown lady. Seen wandering the halls, the stairs, always in that drab brownish dress. He tapped her phone screen. They say she's a former lady of the house, wronged in some way. The most famous photo of her was taken in 1936 on the main staircase. It's quite a famous bit of paranormal history. Anya's mouth was dry. What does she do? Martin shrugged, a little too casually. The stories vary. She's just seen, mostly, a presence, a feeling of being watched. He handed the phone back. Of course, it's all just folklore. Your stares are probably just casting a funny shadow. But he wouldn't meet her eyes when he said it. That night, Anya went through the motions. Her camera was on the nightstand, aimed at the window. She lay in the dark, waiting for the clock. She wasn't sure what she was more afraid of, seeing the figure or not seeing it. 4. Oh. The paralysis clamped down. It was a familiar, icy vice. Her eyes, as always, were dragged to the window. The stairs were empty. For a second, a wild, desperate hope fled. Maybe it was over. Maybe knowing its name had broken the spell. Then her eyes, straining at their corners, saw it. The figure wasn't on the stairs. It was standing on the flagstones, directly in front of her window. It was closer than it had ever been. No longer a translucent smudge, but a solid, dark silhouette against the night. The drab dress was a black void. And the head was no longer bowed. It was raised. It was looking directly at her through the glass. Anya tried to scream. The sound died in her frozen throat. She heard a sound then. Not from outside. From inside her room. It was the soft, dry creak of a door hinge. Her bedroom door, which she had closed, which she had locked, it was opening. Slowly. Inevitably. Her eyes, wide with terror, couldn't turn to see it. They were fixed on the window. But the silhouette outside was gone. The presence was in the room with her. She could feel it, a drop in temperature, a thickening of the air. The silence had become a physical thing, pressing down on her. She heard no footsteps, only the faintest, almost imperceptible rustle of old, dry fabric moving across the floorboards. It was approaching the bed. With a final desperate strain of will, Anya turned her head the few inches to the right. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it standing there at the foot of her bed, a column of cold in the dark. She pressed her face against the camera. She felt the silent click of the shutter. And in that instant, as the camera's internal mechanism opened, she saw it. Not through the viewfinder, with her own eyes. A translucent, grayish shape resolving at the foot of the iron bed frame. She saw the details of the dress, the pale, indistinct plane of a face turned toward her. And then, as the shutter closed, the lens of her camera fogged over. A perfect, circular bloom of condensation appeared, as if something had leaned very, very close to it. And breathed. She couldn't stay in the bedroom. The air in there felt different now. It felt occupied. So she took her laptop and the camera and set up at the kitchen table. In the stark, clean light of day, she would make sense of it. She would find the flaw in the data. Because there had to be one. She downloaded every single image from the camera. 7 nights. 7 photos. The first thing she did was check the EXIF data. That's the information embedded in every digital photo. The aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO, and of course, the timestamp. 4:04:23 a.m. She clicked the second file. 4:04:23 a.m. The third. 4:04:23. She went through all 7. Every single one was identical. Not just the hour and minute. The exact same second. 23 seconds past 4:04 in the morning. Now, a reasonable person would think the camera's clock was stuck. A glitch. But Anya was a professional. She checked the clock on the camera itself. It was correct. She cross-referenced the file creation times on her computer. They all showed the same impossible synchronization. 7 different moments over a week, captured at the precise same instant down to the second. That's not a glitch. That's a schedule. Her hands were cold. She pulled up the clearest image, the one from the third night. The figure was midway up the stairs, its head slightly turned. It had that grainy gray translucence, that drab, shapeless dress. She opened a new browser tab. She typed in "Brown Lady of Raynham Hall photograph 1936. The image loaded. A black and white photograph, famous in paranormal circles. It showed a spectral, misty figure floating on a grand staircase. A woman in an old-fashioned dress. Anya's breath hitched. She put the two images side by side, her photo and the one from 1936. The posture was the same. The slight stiff forward lean. The dress. It was the same cut, the same length, the same drab, heavy fabric. The most famous ghost photo in England, and she had a matching set. But it was the details that turned the key. The figure in the old photo was caught on a staircase landing, one foot slightly raised as if descending. In Anya's photo, the figure was also on a staircase landing. The positioning of the arms, the angle of the head. It wasn't just similar, it was a perfect match. Then she read the account of the 1936 photograph. Two photographers, using a flashbulb, captured the figure on the main staircase of Raynham Hall. They described the time. They had taken the photo at 4 o'clock in the morning. A soft, disbelieving sound escaped her. It wasn't just the same ghost. It was the same event. A recording, a piece of history, trapped in a loop, playing itself out over and over. For nearly a century, it had played on the grand staircase of a manor house. But her flat wasn't on the grand staircase. Her flat was built on the old kitchen gardens. It had its own, smaller, servant stairs. The realization was a slow, cold drip down her spine. The event had moved. It had transplanted itself. It had found a new staircase to descend, and it had followed its script perfectly, night after night, for her. Until last night. Last night, the script had changed. The figure had left the stairs. It had come to the window, and then it had come inside. The haunting wasn't random. It wasn't a spirit seeking attention. It was a precise, repeating record. And the record had a new, terrifying track on it. One where the figure doesn't just stand on the stairs. One where it finishes its descent and enters the room of the person watching. Anya called Chloe the next morning. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. Chloe answered on the third ring. She sounded tired, but normal. The story spilled out of Anya in a rushed, desperate jumble. The sleep paralysis. The camera. The figure on the stairs. The timestamp. She didn't care if she sounded insane. She had to know. There was a long silence on the other end. Not the silence of disbelief. It was the silence of someone putting pieces together. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered. Her voice had gone thin. "I thought it was a trick of the light," she explained. She'd been on a string of night shifts. Her sleep schedule was a wreck. 2 nights ago, she'd woken up around 4 in the morning. She couldn't move. And she had that feeling, the specific, crawling feeling of being watched from the corner of the room. Her eyes had gone straight to the window. "I saw something on the stairs," Chloe said. "Just for a second. Like a person-shaped smudge. I told myself it was a shadow from the garden wall, but it felt wrong. So she'd done what anyone would do. She'd fumbled for her phone on the nightstand. She'd pointed it blindly at the window, her fingers clumsy with sleep and fear. She tapped the screen to take a photo. The flash didn't go off. She didn't even look at the picture. She just put the phone under her pillow and eventually fell back into a fitful sleep. "I saw it this morning," Chloe said, her voice trembling now, "when your text came in. I opened the photo, and I saw her on the stairs. I deleted it straight away. I wish I hadn't, but I did. It felt contaminated." "You deleted it," Anya repeated, her heart sinking. The proof was gone. "But I sent it to my sister first," Chloe said quickly, "as a joke. A look at this weird shadow thing. Before I really looked. Before you called. I still have that." A minute later, the image arrived on Anya's laptop. She opened it. And there it was. Not a professional camera's long exposure, but the harsh digital grain of a phone's night mode. The composition was different, tilted, but the subject was the same. The worn stone steps, the dark garden beyond, and halfway up, a pale, translucent shape. The dress, the posture. It was on the third step, the exact same step it had been on for Anya weeks ago. Her eyes went straight to the file information. She opened the metadata panel. The timestamp read 4:04:23 a.m. Of course it did. A cold confirmation, but then her gaze dropped to the date. And this is where the story stops being a ghost story and becomes something else. Something that doesn't fit. Something that breaks the rules of the little world we think we live in. The date on Chloe's photo was not from 2 nights ago. It was stamped for a date 2 weeks in the future. Anya stared. She refreshed the panel. She checked the file's creation date, its modification date, all identical, all pointing to a night that had not happened yet. She got Chloe to check the sent image on her own phone. The same future date. A reasonable person would blame a glitch, a phone incorrectly set. But Chloe was a nurse. Her life ran on precise timing. And Anya had just lived through the tyranny of the timestamp. She knew this wasn't a mistake. The phenomenon wasn't tied to her. It wasn't personal. She hadn't attracted it. She had simply been the occupant in the seat when the show played. And when she left, the show didn't stop. It just waited for the next viewer. It followed the space, the room, that specific alignment of walls and window and ancient stone stairs, and it was operating on a schedule that didn't just repeat the past. It was stamped with a future time. As if the event was preordained, locked into the fabric of the place, waiting to manifest for anyone present. A recording on a loop, with a terrifying, inscrutable purpose. Anya's feeling of relief curdled into something much worse, a heavy, cold guilt. She had escaped. She had passed the haunting on, and now Chloe, a stranger, was in that bedroom, and after Chloe there would be someone else. And after them, another. The flat would always be rented. The price would always be just low enough, and the performance at 4:04 a.m. would always have an audience. It was a permanent tenant, and she had just sublet to it. The aftermath was quiet in all the worst ways. Anya moved back to Norwich. She slept with a lamp on. She found herself flinching at digital clocks as they clicked over to 4 a.m. Her heart was a trapped bird in her chest until 4:05 had safely passed. She never looked at the photos again. She transferred them to an external drive and put that drive in a safety deposit box. It felt like containing a pathogen. But she couldn't bring herself to delete them. They were proof. Not for anyone else. For the part of her mind that still tried to insist it had all been a dream. Her compulsion was the rental listing. Every few months, late at night, she would search for it. The flat was always there. Always available. The photos were the same cheerful shots from her initial viewing. The description always mentioned historic charm and unique original features. The price was always just a little too reasonable. And the let agreed flag would appear. Then, a month or two later, it would vanish. The listing was back. Fresh. Waiting. She tracked it for over a year. The longest tenancy she saw was 11 weeks. No one ever complained. No reviews, no reports. People just left. They broke their leases and slipped away into silence. You don't report a ghost to the letting agency. You just go. And the next person drawn by the low rent would move in. The audience would change. The performance would not. She met Martin for coffee months later. He'd called her. He said he'd found something, not in the ghost stories, in the architectural surveys. He slid a photocopied map across the table. It was an old estate plan of the grounds. He pointed to a small square structure not far from the main hall. "The ice house," he said. His voice was low and careful. "Common on these estates, a deep, brick-lined pit for storing ice cut from the ponds in winter." Anya nodded. She waited. She knew there was more. Martin's finger didn't move. He tapped the square. Its purpose was preservation, keeping food cold, keeping game from spoiling. He paused. He looked directly at her. But in the winter months, when the cold was deep and constant, it had another use. Before a funeral, when there was a body in the house, they'd use it as a temporary mortuary, a holding space for the dead. He let that sit in the quiet hum of a coffee shop, and he placed a modern map beside it. He'd drawn a new shape in red pen, the outline of her old flat. He aligned the two maps. The walls of her former bedroom fell directly over the square at the ice house. Your room, he said softly, was built on the site of the dead room. Anya didn't feel fear then. She felt a profound, hollow cold. It wasn't about a ghost on a staircase. It was about a process, a function of the land, a place that had one job: to keep things cold and still and preserved. The 404 protocol wasn't a haunting. It was a maintenance check. A system, older than the house itself, running its diagnostic. Checking to see if the cold was still holding, if the preservation was still intact. And every night, it would find a warm, living body in its quiet, dark space, a disruption in the perfect stillness. And it would approach, to inspect, to document. She understood the timestamps then. They weren't a record of the past repeating. They were a schedule for a recurring task, an eternal, punctual upkeep. And the figure on the stairs wasn't a lost soul. It was a symptom, the feeling of the cold, moving, descending, coming to do its work. She never checked the listing again. She didn't need to. She knows the flat is still there. She knows the price is still low. And she knows that every few months, someone new will lie down in that room in the dark. The ancient machinery beneath the floorboards will whir to life at its appointed hour. It's not a ghost story. It's a property feature. The permanent tenant isn't the lady in the dress. The permanent tenant is the cold, and it always collects its rent. The tape has reached its end. I hope the stories tonight brought a pleasant chill to your spine as you drifted further into the dark. Thank you for braving the shadows here at the Sleep Paralysis tapes. If you are still awake, lying still in the quiet, remember to contact me with your own unsettling encounters so they can be added to our growing archive. As my voice fades away, let the silence of your room wrap around you completely. May your sleep be undisturbed, your doors remain locked, and your morning arrive safely. Until we open the tapes again, good night.